Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a topic that has, frankly, been a mystery for way too long: women's health.
So, let's just ask it straight up. Why has women's health been treated like some big, unsolvable puzzle? Because when you start to dig into the data, you realize this isn't a mystery. It's a massive medical blind spot.
Think about this for a second. Women are 51% of the population. That's the majority, right? And yet, for some reason, their health is often treated like it's a niche, optional subject. How does that even make sense?
And if you really want to know why, well, you just have to follow the money. Of the roughly $450 billion spent on medical research, less than 1% is dedicated to health issues that specifically affect women over 40. I mean, let that sink in. Less than 1%. It's just wild.
And you might think, oh, this is some problem from the Dark Ages. But no. It wasn't until 1993, that women were even legally required to be included in clinical research studies. That very recent history has created this huge knowledge gap, and the consequences are very, very real.
Okay, so let's get into the first big reason for this mess. It all comes down to a massive gender data gap. The very foundation of modern medicine is, you could argue, kind of flawed right from the start.
You see, for literally centuries, the default human in pretty much all medical research was a man, specifically a 70-kilogram or about 154-pound man. And why? Well, researchers thought that women's fluctuating hormones, the menstrual cycle, were just too messy. They saw it as a variable that would just complicate the data. So what did they do? They just studied men and then kind of hoped for the best, generalizing their findings to women. As you can probably guess, that created a model that just doesn't work for half the population.
And this isn't just some interesting factoid for a textbook. No, this has absolutely devastating real-world consequences. So while women tend to live a little bit longer, they spend about 20% more of their lives in poor health. They're twice as likely to have mental health disorders and more likely to lose their independence to things like dementia. And on top of all that, conditions that only women get, like PCOS and endometriosis, are just systematically underfunded. It's a huge, huge problem.
So this brings us to our next big idea, which is so important to understand. Women are not small men. I know it sounds completely obvious, but ignoring this simple fact isn't just lazy science, it's actually dangerous.
And this is where you can really see why that one-size-fits-all medicine just completely falls apart. Take a heart attack, for example. In men, it's often that classic widowmaker you hear about, a big blockage in a big artery. But in women, totally different. It's usually these tiny, diffuse blockages in the microvessels deep inside the heart muscle. It goes all the way down to our cells. Cells from XW donors are just better at making bone. Cells from XX donors are better at making cartilage and muscle. These differences are literally coded into us from the ground up.
So when you have a system built on male data, what happens when women show up with symptoms that don't fit the model? Well, a lot of the time, they get dismissed. And this dismissal even got its own slang in the medical world. This quote comes from a doctor talking about her training. A woman comes in with a bunch of vague complaints, and the senior doctor just goes, you got a WW. When she asked what that was, he said, we call that a whiny woman around here. Can you imagine? And that wasn't the only term. Total body dolor was another one. This just shows how deep that bias can run.
Okay, so this history of being dismissed leads us right to something that we need to totally reframe: the menstrual cycle. For way too long, it's been seen as an inconvenience or a curse, but the reality is, it should be treated as a fifth vital sign.
Yep, exactly. You should think of it like a monthly report card on your overall health. Your body is this incredible machine that's supposed to work like clockwork. And if that clockwork is off, if your cycle is all over the place, that's a huge red flag. It's your body waving its hands trying to tell you something's up. It could be stress, it could be nutrition, or it could be a deeper metabolic issue.
All right, so let's do a super quick breakdown. The first half of your cycle, that's the follicular phase, is all about building up. Your brain sends out a signal to grow an egg, and that growing egg pumps out estrogen. That estrogen is like rocket fuel. It's why you often have more energy, better focus, better performance. It's your peak phase.
But then, after ovulation, everything shifts. You enter the second half, the luteal phase. Now, your body starts making progesterone, getting ready for a potential pregnancy. And this changes everything. Your core body temperature actually rises, so does your resting heart rate. And this is why you might feel more tired, or why your moods shift, or why you're suddenly craving all the snacks. Your body is doing something totally different, and it's doing it on purpose.
So you can see how important this all is. What happens when this super important vital sign is just ignored? What happens when a woman's pain is brushed off? Well, you get these devastatingly long delays in diagnosing really serious conditions like endometriosis and PCOS. Endometriosis is a perfect and heartbreaking example. It's a chronic inflammatory disease where tissue that's like the uterine lining starts growing outside the uterus. It causes horrible pain, it can scar your organs, and it can affect fertility. But so often, it just gets misdiagnosed as bad periods or even stomach problems.
And this right here, this is the real story of a patient named Liv. Look at this journey. Her first symptoms, agonizing pain, started when she was 13. It took 17 years to get a diagnosis. 17 years. Along the way, she was put on the pill, told she had gastritis, and she even had her appendix taken out for no reason. It wasn't until she was 30 and paid for a private surgery that they finally confirmed she had stage 4 disease. And the heartbreaking part is, her story isn't some rare exception, it's shockingly common.
And it's a similar story with PCOS, or polycystic ovary syndrome. It's a huge cause of irregular cycles, but what's the typical treatment? Often, it's just the birth control pill, which, can feel like a Band-Aid. It might manage the symptoms on the surface, but it often completely misses the root cause, which is usually tied to metabolic health and insulin resistance.
Okay, so after hearing all of this, what can we actually do? The big takeaway is that knowledge is power. It's your best weapon against a system that, frankly, wasn't built with you in mind. It all comes down to knowing your own body so you can be your own best advocate.
So here it is, your action plan. Step 1. Track your cycle. You have to know what normal looks like for you. The length, the symptoms, everything. 2. Reframe pain. Pain that stops you from living your life is not normal. It's a signal, not a symptom you just have to suffer through. 3. Trust your gut. You know your body better than anyone. If something feels off, don't be afraid to get a second or even a third opinion. And finally, be demanding. You have to advocate for your health with the same fire you'd have if you were fighting for your child. It's that important.
So we'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. If your menstrual cycle really is a monthly report card, what is yours telling you? It's time to start listening, really listening, because that report is telling you everything you need to know about your health.